Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am A. Ron, and this is the Inclusive Dad Podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, rate, or review the show on your favorite platform. We truly appreciate your feedback and would be honored if you shared the podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Today, my guest is Effy MacMorris. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you start us off with just telling me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Effy MacMorris, like you said. We had the pleasure to meet because you were on an episode of my podcast, which is
Yes.
where I got to learn so much about you, which was really cool. But now the tables have turned and I'm in the hot seat, if you will. Um, but yeah, I live nomadically with my family of four. We travel full time and I am a mom, I'm a partner, I'm a friend, I'm an advocate, I am a part of the LGBTQ plus community. Like I have so many hats. So if you want to know more about me, like come and find me. Let's talk. Or just tell Aaron to ask me more questions.
There you go. So thanks for that introduction. What is your definition of inclusion?
Whew. Um, my definition of inclusion is really just acceptance. I think allowing I have so many definitions like running through my mind that it's a little bit difficult to cohesively say one thing. But I think inclusion is just making sure that everybody is like seen, heard, and accepted, despite any differences you may have with that person. Um, and I think that belongs for who you are at a core, whether it's your preferences, your physical ability, your mental ability, your skin color, your accent, like in your ability to even speak or walk or talk or like whatever it is. I think inclusion is just making sure that there's space for every single person.
It's a great definition. Good job.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't fail the first question.
No, you didn't.
Good.
Has that kind of, I mean, you kind of um, did it right on the spot there, but how has your view of like inclusion or including people changed over time, or have you kind of always included everybody?
Oh, I think it's certainly expanded. I think my ideal level of inclusion when I was younger was like-minded individuals, making sure that I was, making space for my friends and the people that I cared about. But as I got older, I realized that is so much more, and inclusion through especially corporate environments and honestly just like being a person out in the world. My level of understanding of inclusivity has changed drastically. When I was younger, I was a pretty privileged child, I believe. Obviously had my own struggles and my own issues, but I didn't see nearly the level of uninclusion or disclusion. I guess I'm not entirely sure what the opposite word is. Until I started to look inward, until I started to explore outward. So I didn't realize what inclusion meant until I was older and officially diagnosed with some mental disabilities, what that meant for me learning, what that meant in a school setting,
Sure.
what that meant in a corporate setting, what that has now taken definition and become as a mass movement, I believe. It's changed so much over the years, but specifically for me and in my experience, it changes constantly, and I'm ever learning and trying to adapt and be more inclusive and realize that my experience is not the only experience, and we need to do our best to make sure everybody's like seen and heard.
Absolutely.
And that includes me like constantly. And I'm sure you, even though you are the inclusive dad, I'm sure you're constantly learning and trying to figure out new ways of how to be inclusive.
Yeah, for sure. So it sounds like you Did you have like an IEP in school, or did you find out you had some mental disabilities?
It wasn't until I was much older. So
Okay.
I was in high school navigating some family dynamic changes and things like that, and really didn't spend. I don't think I had the advocacy that I needed when I was that age. So I wasn't. Um, I didn't have an IEP. I didn't have any type of, special structure or what I think could have just been structure to make me m
Right.
more comfortable in a school setting, but
Okay.
instead I sort of just flailed and flopped a lot and didn't finish things or, had trouble with subjects and just kind of was left to be like, "Oh, she doesn't get it. She's not putting in the effort, whatever it is,
Right.
easily dismissed." And I think it wasn't until I was in my 20s and started navigating my own self-awareness and understanding of who I am that I realized those mental disabilities actually stood in my way of learning and stood in my way of being a successful participant in my education. But I'm making changes to that now. I'm doing my
Hmm.
best to learn what I can, and I
Yeah.
think like helping make that difference in people's understanding of their child's education now as well, doing things like this to advocate and say like, hey, if something feels off, especially if you're a child or a younger human, and you're like, hey, it seems like it's coming a lot easier for my cohorts, my peers, I guess is the word I'm looking for, that it likely isn't you and you should talk to somebody, find therapy, find a safe adult to have that conversation with.
Yeah. So growing up, I don't remember like the word disability being used or seeing anybody in a wheelchair. Uh, Even remember hearing about special education. So, when you grew up, did you have any exposure to disability that you remember?
Yeah, I think some, I know we would spend a lot of time at my uncle was a firefighter, and so we would spend a lot of time at the firehouse, and one of the people who worked there had like a physical disability, and I remember my mom having a conversation with me sort of about that.
Okay.
But that was probably my first introduction to even like what a disability could be.
Right.
But then also I have two family members who have type 1 diabetes, and so they were really big advocates for going on diabetes walks and talking about
Sure.
that and
Yep.
sort of navigating what that looked like. So I know there was a lot of exposure, but not a lot of advocacy. It was a lot more like, hey, like, we don't really talk about that. Let's,
Yeah.
like, we can go out there, we can do this, but then like that's kind of it. And I think that we should be shouting. I think we should be like having a disability or acknowledging disability is not something to be like shushed or hidden or
Right. For sure.
whatever. Like it is, let's talk about it. Let's,
Yeah.
whatever.
Um, how about you? Have you always been included in your life?
Oh, for sure not. I think in a lot of ways, like, yeah, um, I've had more inclusion than I think some other people have experienced, which is why I've become such an advocate and why I care so much. But I certainly have felt excluded in a number of ways. I'm a bigger person than, a lot of the female representatives you see on our television
Yeah.
screens and magazines and, you know, movie stars and whatever. And so I always felt sort of excluded from femininity because I was a larger woman and that I didn't deserve to feel pretty or sexy or beautiful because my butt was bigger or whatever. Um, so definitely feeling excluded from like half of the world's population,
Right.
just because I didn't feel I represented women properly by not being a certain way. And then on top of that, I learned I had two blood disorders a number of years ago, and sort of navigating what that will look like and what that means when you're sort of faced with a medical illness and having to advocate for yourself in that aspect. You're supposed to trust doctors. You're supposed to, trust these people in higher paying positions or whatever. But when they're looking at you and saying like, just this is what's wrong or this is what you need to do differently, and there's no empathy and no discussion, you can really, really, really quickly feel let down by the people who are supposed to be providing you care. So I think in that aspect, I felt unincluded. And then I think just in the last 10 years, I mean, last even 5 years since COVID sort of has come into our lives, seeing people be so easily left to flail on their own. Right now, we're in the middle of a lot of hurricanes, and I know that prisons aren't being evacuated because, and I get it, like, yeah, we've been taught to believe that prison inmates don't maybe deserve the same level of love and respect and care that we do, but guess what? They do, and they're being left
Right.
to die. And like all of these things are levels of inclusion. And like I think it's a fight that we're like seemingly never going to stop fighting, but I hope that one day we do. I hope that one day like everyone is sort of treated and seen as legitimate equals.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that stuff bugs me too, and I can't go into too much details. But in part of my job, I recently came across somebody where like we talked about jails and prisons, where
Yeah.
I mean, when their time is up and it's time for them to get out of jail, like they don't help them. At
Oh
least
yeah,
what I've
there's
heard,
no
like
support.
they don't like help them find a place to live or anything. Like, hey, you're
Mhm.
done. Here, just go.
Yeah. You're
I'm like,
welcome, essentially.
I was like,
You're welcome
wow,
that we're sending you out there. Yeah.
that's crazy.
Um Unfortunately, we say that it's rehabilitation, that we're helping these people, but more often than not, it's systematical. And
Right.
we're getting kids who are, in exactly a situation that I was in, scared, unsure, feeling discouraged, feeling like I'm not a part of all of the communities around me because I was different or felt different or whatever. And then just kind of being left to flail and figure it out on my own is like not what I want for other people. And I think
Right.
that happens with mental illness in prisons. I think that happens with any sort of health issues. I know a
Yeah.
number of people who are high risk who constantly have to think about how they're interacting with other people in the outside world because there's not a lot of caring for each other, especially unfortunately, since the start of the pandemic, it's become quite a political
Yes.
argument as opposed to a health and safety argument. And it's really, that sucks. Because, like, you could lose your ability to live your life comfortably really quickly, especially right now. And I think more often than not, we're not thinking about that, or a lot of people aren't out there thinking about that. And disability comes in many forms, and things can change in your life pretty quickly. And I think it's important to acknowledge that and do the best you can to be a good neighbor, friend, advocate, human, etc.
Yeah, for sure. I think the statistic right now is like 1 in 4 people have a disability. But I
Wow.
did some when I was doing my latest TEDx talk. I did a little bit of research, and if you live to like just the um, expected life expectancy around like 70, I think it goes up to like 40%, and then like each 10 years after that, it goes up to like 50, or if you live to 90, it's 75% of
Wow.
us will need assistance with like daily living tasks before we pass away. So it's just the chances that all anybody is going to have a disability before they die either short term or long term is really high. So yeah, it's one of those things like you said. It's I mean, in
Yeah.
a second you can go from not having a disability to having one. So it's unfortunate that we don't think about
Have
that
better,
and
like,
yeah,
yeah. And have better
plan.
systems in play and plan, yeah,
Right.
and make choices that could alter that. I mean, right
Right.
now, going out unmasked into large crowds and making kind of poor decisions, going on a plane. I mean, like, we
Right.
know the air circulation isn't great. We know that people are traveling. Like, we now know what COVID looks like. Like, if something as simple
Right.
as putting a mask on can protect you from potentially getting sick and ending up with a disability, I think wearing a mask for a 6-hour flight is like not that crazy. But unfortunately, like, we said, it's
Yeah.
become pretty stigmatized, and it's not seen as like a medical necessity or reasoning. And it's just a bummer. It's a big bummer.
Yeah.
Because I know one day I didn't have a disability and now I do, and like that can alter what it looks like for me to leave my house. That can alter what it looks like for me to parent, how to be a partner. Yesterday was like a day of celebration for my family, and I was really depressed and like couldn't get out of bed and couldn't celebrate with my partner. And um it was, just for lack of a better word, I don't know if I can curse, but it was fucking hard and it was
Yeah.
sad and it was like shitty to be like in a moment where I want to enjoy my family and I can't, because my brain is literally just like spiraling and telling me a million horrible things. And like I said, one day that could not be your normal, and then one day it could be. And not having that sense of awareness and communication, especially amongst your family members, like, can cause some rifts.
Yeah.
Luckily, I have a great support system. So,
Yeah.
but,
That's awesome. That,
and I know
the,
your family
the,
does too,
yeah,
but
for sure.
yeah,
The part that's awesome is that you have a good support system. I just want to be
yeah,
clear on which part
for
was
sure.
the awesome part. So yeah, I don't think too much before I started my podcast, you started your podcast. So why did you start your podcast?
Essentially, I guess inclusion also. I think when I became a parent, I saw a lot of people uh, making choices with this sort of, and we've all experienced it, I'm sure. This is how you do things. This is how things have been done. Like, and it was sort of expected that because we were having a baby, that we would buy a house and we would
Mm,
settle down and live in this
right.
one
Yep.
place. And so a lot of things that you're taught about how to care for a child are with the intention that you're not moving, that you're stationary, that like
Right.
there's systematical situations in play
Yep.
just amongst your family. And with that not being the case for us, I felt sort of not like abandoned, but like lost in motherhood and lost in parenting, because
Sure.
I didn't see anyone like me parenting. And so my intention was to build a community of other parents who are maybe doing things a little bit differently and figuring out ways to, I don't know, lean on each other instead
Hmm.
of the people who maybe don't get it. Or, like I said, I have so many wonderful people in my life. I have a great support system, but it can
Yep.
be really difficult to lean on your fellow parents and have them not really understand what you're struggling with, because their experience is quite different. So I wanted to be our experience for maybe someone else looking to do what we're doing, or maybe just make a different choice than what everyone around them is making, and
Right.
that's okay.
That's great. So were you guys already like um being nomads before you had your child then or
Yes and no. We were
okay.
not stationary.
Okay.
We'd give a place a year and then we'd sort of move on. And now we've kind of condensed that and we do about a month and then we move on. Uh,
Hmm.
so not nearly as nomadic as we have become in my daughter's life, which
Sure.
seems surprising. But yeah, we started in 2023. She was about 3 months old. We got on the road
Okay.
and we started taking little trips here and there. Then we felt braver, and then in 20 like end of 2023, we packed everything up and said, "Okay, here we go." And now we've been living out of a car in suitcases for like 11 months.
Sure.
That's a long time.
So what about that lifestyle like drew you to it?
Is it that I was drawn to it or that I just knew what I didn't want? I think it's that I knew what I
Okay.
didn't want. I we don't know where we wanna live. Like, prices of things are so expensive right now in the
Yes.
US.
Yep.
Buying a house is, like, terrifying. Planning to, like, live in one area seems really, really daunting when we don't know what else is out there. Um and so it was more so that we just didn't feel ready to do the thing that everyone was saying that we had to do.
Yeah.
I wasn't working a typical 9 to 5 job. I'm spending time raising my daughter and we have savings and we're able to sort of, and we're paying maybe a couple hundred more in rent than we would be if we had to like settle down right now. Um, but it's been so freaking worth it. Like, it's so cool to meet all the different people we meet and see how people are doing things differently and finding that community and those people that just seemingly are like glowing that I never would have met if we didn't live the way that we do.
Yeah. Well, that's great because I mean, like, I follow the traditional path. Just you go to school, get done with that, go to college. I mean, I got married pretty young, had kids, buy a house, just that whole thing. And then at some point, you're like, man, I wish I would have traveled more when I was young, before we had kids, and all this kind of stuff. Or you just something feels off. So I mean, I applaud you guys for just trying doing something different, and not just doing what everybody else does. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's scary, like, don't get me wrong, but,
Yeah.
it's been really, really rewarding. I mean, the child that we parent, Poppy, is, holy moly, she's 20 months or so,
Okay.
and she's been to, I think, 14 states, and we're hoping that she'll hit 24 before she's 24 months.
Okay. That's cool.
So I think that's a lot of states for a little human to have been in. And I think it makes her so adaptable. She's so keen on like
Yeah.
going to new places, learning new things. She loves exploring. She loves people. Like I think if anything, it's made her such a more adventurous and brave person. And they say the first 3 years of a kid's life are their most like informative and most monumental years in
Sure.
growth and development. And so I think she is like learning so much that hopefully it goes with her into the rest of her life and she stays brave and strong. And I don't know, maybe.
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 We'll
I know
see.
what, like you said, I was on your podcast. Well, it's been a couple. Wow, it's probably been more months now than I
Yeah,
realized. Probably three or
it
4 months ago.
has.
It's been a while. But that was. I want to thank you again for that. That was awesome. We had a great conversation. I think I had you tearing up at least once. So
At least once.
yeah, when I was
Your
listening.
story,
Yeah.
just like looking back, your story with your daughter, your experience with both your children, your family, and navigating a lot of those big changes for you, what that's looked like, and then hearing how like you advocated for your child. Shit, I'm getting teary eyed now. I think it was something that I didn't have nearly as much as I would have liked when I was a child. So it's something that I really try and foster in my parenting. It's something that I
Hmm.
think both my partner and I work really hard on to be an advocate and to be her number one, like,
Right.
obviously protector, but like, we're teaching her, we're guiding her, whatever. And like to hear how you've done that with your daughter despite some of the hardships you guys faced was really beautiful. um because especially like I said earlier, school, doctors, those are people we look up to, those are people we look
Yep.
to for guidance. And you saw something, you felt something wasn't right, and you became your daughter's number one advocate. And like, not that you became, I mean that you weren't that to begin with, but like you saw something and you said like, hey, I feel this isn't right. So I need to look. I need to see something. And I think like that's all we can do as human beings, as
Right.
advocates, as people, as like partners, friends, family, like to see what's really going on is like just so important.
Yeah,
And I'm
thank
going to
you.
stop crying.
Yeah, and for me, it's just the you see it and then
Ooh,
speaking up about
okay.
it because
Anyway,
that's the yeah, like speaking up about it. If you recognize it, say something because that was just for me. Starting off, I would see stuff and then I'm like, how is this still happening? Is like nobody else saying something? Like, why is it still happening? So for me, it was always just I if I recognize something, bring it up because nobody else I'm around was bringing up the same stuff. So that was a huge part of it for me.
yeah.
For sure.
Well, I'm proud of you for doing it. And I'm
Thank you.
grateful to know you because I think what you've done is really great.
Thanks. How do you think we can use empathy to be more inclusive?
Oh my God. I think it's like the number one tool in that tool belt. I think I just in general, I think I'm a very feely person. I think like if my heart feels badly about something, I'm like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
that's the guidance that I know that maybe I shouldn't
Right.
do that, or that doesn't feel right, that doesn't look right. So I use my sense of empathy, how something makes me feel, to guide me in my moral thoughts and feelings. Especially as an agnostic person, I don't have God to sort of give me that moral compass, and so I use my own empathy, which whatever. I think that in and of itself, for every person, I think they can use that as their moral compass. If something feels wrong, if something doesn't feel good, or if something does feel good, you see something and you're like, hey, I think I can help make that better. Like say something, do something. Like
Right.
you are you are the person who can take the step. You are the person who can do the thing, and you can bring more people into awareness. And you felt something, you made a choice, you made more people aware, and now you've done TED Talks. You've brought in so much awareness to what matters for students in a school setting, what matters for your daughter in a life setting, what matters for just every single person in a life setting. And then you've created this. So I think like feeling is behind everything. It's the tool. It's the number one gear that's spinning that's going to lead us to make choices and do the things that are going to help advocate and bring inclusion to the masses and make sure everyone is literally included. That like at some point we don't have to keep talking about it.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is like I've seen like a little graphic on Facebook like we'll know that we are fully including when we don't have to use the word inclusion anymore. That's not exactly what it is, but something the
Yeah,
gist
but
of
the
that. So
general consensus.
yeah,
Um, and it sucks that some people think that that's true. I saw something recently that said, I work like crazy to support the lazy. And I was so disheartened by it because I thought, what you consider lazy is most often disability.
right.
And while yes, there are certainly people who cheat the system, who maybe are considered quote unquote lazy, if you will. But
Right.
90% of the time, when I saw that, I was like, dude, you know that that's just disability. You know that that person is probably
Right.
fighting something that you just don't understand.
Yep.
And like, that's where inclusion needs to come into play. That's where that empathy needs to come into play. Imagine that you tomorrow can't walk. Like, take it as far as you need to take it for it to make sense to you. Like, invisible illness is really difficult. Mental illness is really difficult for people to advocate for because they can't see it, because
Yeah.
so take it that far. Think in your head, like literally imagine you woke up tomorrow with no limbs. Like, what
Yeah.
is out there to help you? What services, what people, what friends, like what family, because if that happens to you, there's no one out there ready to help. They're
Yeah.
not waiting for you to help. Like, you need to be, and that's what I think needs to change, is that there should be systems ready to help. There should be When
Right.
I first got diagnosed with some of my illnesses, looking for those people and that community and to go to like help groups and to lean on those doctors, because the other thing is you're going through like a mental burden, like whether, whatever it is that's going on, like to process your feelings and to also navigate that is a job in and of itself when dealing with
Right.
disability. And then you've got to deal with health insurance. And I know when we had talked about it, having your kid on state health insurance, what that can mean for what doctors you get to see. So
Yep.
let's say a doctor's making you feel badly or not seeing you for what's really going on. And then you have to fight with the insurance company to get the test done, to get the doctor to say the thing. Like it's literally a job. And
Yep.
when we're not there to support our quote unquote lazy people, or we're including everyone, or whatever these cliched sayings are that people think. The truth of the matter is those people are paying bills and working just to get the help that they need, just to make it through the next day. So it's
Right.
not that we're not working as hard as you, because truth is we're probably working a lot harder than you, because
Yeah.
there's something standing in our way. And like it could be something standing in your way one day. So maybe
Yeah,
don't
for
be a
sure.
jerk.
Don't be a jerk. There you
Hey,
go.
maybe that'd be cool.
What is one tip you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? Just something simple they can do today to be more inclusive.
Just it seems so simple, but just like open your eyes, look up for 2 seconds. Like don't like I know it's so stupid, but we're all like looking down at our phones and we're all paying attention to the 10,000 things that are
Right.
going on around us. And like, I said to my husband the other day, now that I'm a quote unquote content creator, I was like, I never see anyone else out there recording. I never see anyone else like, making these stupid videos and setting up their tripod. And he was like, are you kidding? Like, look around. They're everywhere. And then all of a sudden I started looking and I was like, oh, there's somebody. Oh, there's somebody.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with inclusion, with noticing things. Just like lift your head up, take a look around. You might see somebody who is having trouble crossing the street because some jerk pulled their car right up to the crosswalk. And so now the person who has to use a cane or just has the mobility issue can't get up on the curb, and like you can help them. And
Yeah.
that's like such an easy thing that you would not have seen if you didn't just
Yep.
look up from your phone. So it takes 2 seconds. If you're listening to this and you're also playing some game on your phone, put it down, look up, see who might just need a helping hand today, and help them. It doesn't have to be huge. Like
Yeah.
the little things are what changes the world. So like just look at your
Absolutely.
friend, look at your neighbor, give someone a hug, say hi. It's really just get out of your bubble.
Yeah.
Maybe that's too hard. Maybe that's not a simple thing to tell the audience to do.
Getting out of
Get
your
out of your
bubble.
bubble. Yeah.
But it's scary out of my bubble.
It sure is. The world is scary, like
Yeah.
for sure. But I mean, it's the only way. If I can, my thought process is if I can think of one person who has it worse than me, then I need to keep trying. Then I need to keep doing better the next day. And I can think of thousands of people right now who are having millions who are having a really hard day, whether it's
Right.
from wars, whether it's from uh, their own strife, whether it's from global catastrophes, whether it's
Hmm.
from, whatever it may be. Someone
Yeah.
someone else is struggling. And so like while I can't take that away, I can make the effort to do a little bit better today.
Absolutely. Is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't discussed?
I don't know like how well the people who listen know you. I don't know if it's all your friends, but I think it's important to say that like I have seen you for the last 4 months I've watched and done all I can to like support you and see you. And like, I want to thank you for what you've done for everyone, for literally everyone. People don't see it. People may not know right now what it is you're doing for the world, but what you've done for your daughter, you're doing for other people now. And I just want to say thank you. And I'm crying again. And that counts as 2 cries for today. And that's too many. Too many. But I want to say thank you. That's what we haven't talked about. So
You're
thanks.
welcome. Now you got me tearing up too. So thank you for that. Ready for the last question?
We don't. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Shoot. Go. No. Go. Get me.
The
Go.
spam, yes or no?
So from me, it's a no.
That's fine.
I don't.
Have to
I'm not really.
apologize.
I'm not apologizing, but I don't really do meat
Okay.
already, and then I definitely don't do pork. And so I don't think I've even ever had spam, but my husband is a pork person and like a meats person, and he says yes to spam. So I feel like, knowing him, I'm going to give spam a thumbs up from the world, but like from me personally, I'm not going to eat it.
Gotcha. That's great.
That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Where's the best place everybody can connect with you?
Oh, me. Okay, so you can find me at Nomadic Adventures Pod on everything. So that's like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. You can email me at Effy at momadicadventures.com. You can go to momadicadventures.com and find me there. Or you can just text Aaron and say, hey, Aaron, I want to talk to Effy, and he'll send it to me.
There you go.
Just
taking some notes. That's awesome. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks for being on. I put makeup on for this, and then I cried so much that my eyes are kind of burning, and I regretted it. I said I wasn't going to cry. I thought I cried enough yesterday. So,
yeah.
Feelings. Blah.
Feelings. Yeah. To all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inclusive Dad Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, or review the show. Your feedback helps us connect with more champions of inclusion. Remember to share this podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Together we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.